Hello, welcome back, guys. I am your host, Dre, here at Drunken Disorderly. I apologize for my absence the last couple of weeks. I do have to take vacations sometimes, and I left on a Tuesday and came back on a Tuesday, so there was no doing a show. But we have a guest on tonight who I've been wanting to have on for quite some time, and we have three more guests coming up in August. Next Tuesday, we will have Scott Zimmerman, Nebraska Libertarian gubernatorial candidate. A week after that, we'll have friend of the show, Caleb Salvatore. And week after that, we will have Anthony Welty. Anthony is about to go on the road doing some libertarian outreach and I believe instruction. So we will talk with him about that. But tonight we have Guy Squiggs. He is a writer at the Libertarian Republic, and he can be found on Twitter at Guy Squiggs.
Hey, how you doing?
It's so good to finally have you on.
Hey, it's really good to be here.
Awesome. So we became friends on Facebook, like, I don't know, years and years ago. I assume through Austin or the Libertarian Republic.
Right, I would assume probably, through Austin, because that was kind of how I started making my way, into libertarian circles, was because of Austin Peterson's run for president in 2016 after Rand Paul dropped out. I moved, more towards the Libertarian Party at that time. So I met a lot of people that way, and I blew up from like only 200 friends to a couple thousand. So that would probably be a safe bet.
Yeah, I miss you. I miss your content. I miss seeing your adorable children.
Yeah, so, the skinny on that is that I'm no longer on Facebook. The reason for that is apparently Facebook considers pedophiles to be a protected class. So there were a couple of folks, myself, some of you may know Risa Willis, and another individual that we were kind of going into these, like pedophile type of groups, and trying to report content to get it taken down. And then, we were looking at, individuals that were in those groups, and we were messaging their family members to, let them know that, your cousin or your uncle is into children. Probably should keep distance from them. And then, boom, I got hit with a zap off of Facebook. So I have not been on for a year now.
Wow, I did not realize that is what caused your first strike or whatever, banishment from fascist book.
That's where Facebook wanted me to verify my name, or I sent them an ID, and it's been sitting for a year and is in purgatory.
So they have your ID, because I had to go through this myself because somebody reported my name. And I had to send them my ID to prove who I was, because this is my real name. And they got back to me, within like a week, but a year, it's just been sitting there waiting for approval or review.
Right. Yeah, we're going on a year of them still sending me email notifications about updates that are happening, with my friends on that page. But anytime that I've ever tried to log in, I'll log in once a month to see if there's, ever been any movement, because really I just want to take the whole page down to begin with. But it, it still says pretty much, we'll get back to you if we have other questions. Like that's where we've been for a year.
Oh my God. Wow. So yeah, I kind of thought that you quit Facebook. So this is a little bit different. Really? There's a lot of fuckery going on there right now, but I didn't realize that is the sequence of events. Like, it's amazing that they will I've seen a lot of stuff recently about people saying, look at, this is how you identify the child porn pages. They'll have, pictures like this, and they're totally fine. They get reported and Facebook's like, nope, not violating terms and services.
Right. Yeah. And that was, largely one of the things that we found. And that's why we started actually, messaging these people's, contacts that showed that they were like family members. And that was because, these pages would have people that would post like, a picture, of like a scantily clothed child, but also like posing very provocatively. And the caption of that photo, their OP, it would be a serial number. Like it would be just a series of letters and numbers. And to me, at least, that signified a serial number, like this is part of a set, and this is the cover photo of that set. This is all that you're allowed to see, because everything else under that serial number is a lot worse. And if you want all of that stuff under that serial number, you would just contact who posted it.
Oh,
Yeah, so
it was like, this is the number to get this, I don't know, for
yeah,
sale. I mean,
to get this set of photos of this particular child.
oh
Um,
God.
and that's how they were running it. But Facebook would always come back and say, nope, this doesn't violate our terms and conditions. This doesn't violate our terms and conditions. So that's where, we actually got into sending messages, to the, like, family members, friends of those individuals. And then Facebook came at me with the ban for doing that.
So, what was the reaction you guys mostly got from those people, the friends and family members that you contacted, with receipts, I take it?
Right. So yeah, I mean, we would post screenshots. I mean, a lot of the times it wouldn't even, like really be read, because we didn't, like have any mutuals or anything like that. So I mean, a lot of the times it just kind of stayed in the other inbox, unfortunately. But I had to try.
Right, of course. It's funny, I didn't even know that other inbox was there until like years after being on Facebook.
And then looking at the messages that pop up in the other inbox, because Facebook doesn't notify you if something comes, up in the other inbox. You have to go look for the other inbox, and they always change where it is.
Right.
So, yeah, it's, kind of hard to find, but
Yeah, I typically have to stumble my way there somehow if I can. But so, have you heard about the current Facebook warnings about bad information?
I have not. I mean, I know all about, the warning tags that they put on Twitter. I don't know too much about the Facebook side of it, though.
So, this started like right before I went on vacation. So, like 2 weeks ago, they started, if someone would post something about COVID or vaccines or whatever, they would say, they would post a warning. Like before you logged into Facebook, they'd say, be careful. And if you need support, we're here for you. Click on this link for help. If you
Oh,
read
wow.
information that is, damaging to your poor little psyche or whatever. So people were getting those. People were getting, you've been exposed to bad information. This is bad information. Don't read it, or read it at your.
I did see all the memes that came out on Twitter of like the you've been exposed to extremism on Facebook. I did see the extremism version. Those memes were all over Twitter.
So what's Twitter doing? Because Facebook
Um,
knocked that right off after like about a couple days.
right. Twitter, I haven't really run across, too much of that. Except for where they, post, like a tag on like a COVID post that says like this might be misleading, but they still, give you access to the content. There's anytime you try and retweet an article, where that you haven't actually, opened and read, they'll say like, do you want to read the article first? And you have to, click no. But I mean, I'm still a fan, of reading. But I get that a lot, with my own articles where, like where I've written something for the Libertarian Republic, and I posted it, one day, but 3 days later it's still relevant. So I go to retweet myself, and they see that I didn't click on the link that I had originally posted, and they're like, do you want to read the article? And it's like, you know what? I wrote this. I know what's in it. Thank you very much.
Well, I mean, what would you do without Big Brother Twitter to make sure that you're reading the information that you're trying to disperse?
Right, right. And I'm very happy to say that our side of things, throughout this whole COVID pandemic has turned out to be largely correct. We've always been right, to be suspicious of the NIH, to be suspicious of China. Rand Paul has been correct in every single exchange he's had with Fauci. So that's been fun to see. But yeah, we've been on the right side of this. but they're trying everything they can, to deny us our vindication by creating almost like a mainstream cultism, surrounding science when the science is actually not even on their side.
This last year has just been like, it's made me feel like a crazy person. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like, I cannot believe that half of the country is just like lapping it up, bending over, taking whatever, and just gung ho about it every step of the way. Yeah, we'll stay home. Yeah, we'll wear a mask. Yeah, we'll take a jab. Like, what?
and this is where like we like I know people like to make fun of the French because of World War II and white flags, but World War II was a long time ago. And right now we've got nothing on the French. I mean, not only did their basketball team beat our basketball team in the Olympics, Team USA got beat by France in basketball. Are you kidding me? But
I
like
didn't
these are the people also like in France, like they recently I think it happened either earlier today or yesterday, depending on the France time exchange or the time zone difference. But they all rushed into a Capitol. They tore out like a portrait of Macron and they ripped it up out the window, and it put our cute little insurrection to shame. Like these
right.
people are actually out there fighting, where we're just kind of like rolling over and taking it. It's like we don't have a right to make fun of the French anymore. 50 years from now, they're going to be making fun of us as the pussies.
Oh God, won't that be something? I saw that. It's a short little clip, but it's powerful. You know, where they're ripping that down and throwing it through the window, and the
Right.
streets are full of people.
Right. The streets are just full of people that are not having it.
Right, and that's what we need to do. I saw something today saying that the capital city of Nebraska is trying to go back into mask mandates. They were the only city that was like super, super lockdown, super mask mandate, and like stuck to it until the very end in our state. Like our governor was like, no mandates whatsoever. Cities do what you're going to do.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, but yeah, I'm not doing it. I didn't comply last time. I'm not complying this time.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Don't. There's only a very a, a very narrow number of people that would get infected from the virus and have complications from it. That is the elderly and the obese. It doesn't help that America has a 46% obese rate, but damn, look at you look good. I don't think COVID's going to bother you.
No, I actually had trouble putting weight on after I had COVID. That was the only issue I had with it.
Right.
So yeah, it was a cold that lasted a little bit longer than I would have liked.
Right. Yeah. And so it's kind of like it's almost like a coming to roost of the unhealthy lifestyles that we've traditionally celebrated, and here we are trying to protect those unhealthy lifestyles by saying everybody needs to stay home. Children, like this is what has bothered me the most, is that we have generations of people from various like people my age that bought into it, all the way up to retired people who are the ones that want to be protected. And we sacrificed our children for them. It's like the people that are suffering the most from this are the people that are actually like the least likely to not let alone, have a complication, even a symptom. Right. But
Yep.
they're the generation that we have pretty much sacrificed. And you know what? I hope that these, second, third, fourth, fifth graders, I hope these kids grow up and end Social Security out of spite, when they're in their 20s. And everyone that ruined their childhood gets their government retirement taken away. Like if that's what it takes for Social Security to end, boy, am I down for that being the reason.
Yeah, I can't believe what it has done to the kids. And what angers me is what we now know is what you just said about the kids. They won't get the symptoms. They aren't going to have the complications. They're going to be the least affected by the virus. And they are the most affected by everything that has been done in response to the virus. Their social skills are probably going to be screwed up because they don't know what a face looks like.
Right. And obviously, I certainly have my own, personal opinions about things, but I definitely still think that, the biggest culprit that needs to pay, that is probably never actually going to pay, is China. What we've looked at as far as the labs, like I was writing about the Wuhan lab a year and a half ago. And I was called a conspiracy theorist, and but it's one where Occam's razor always fell. Two, even Washington Post had obtained, cables talking about the very, very poor security practices inside that laboratory. And like, it's kind of like the Washington Post completely abandoned their own reporting because, of who the president was. They didn't want to give any credence to the fact that, China could possibly have been wrong. And of course, China was in control of the information that went to the World Health Organization and down to the CDC. And even if you look at it from the fact that the lab leak, if it was a lab leak, which it probably was, and I'm going to suppose it was, but I'm also going to suppose it was, an accident. It wasn't like a biological weapon. But even if it was an accident, when you look at their behavior after, right, they sent the WHO and the CDC, a bunch of misinformation where they said, it's not transmissible from human to human, even though they knew that it was. And the reason why they did that was to completely downplay it. And then they went to work manufacturing all the PPE that they knew that we would need by pretty much encouraging us not to do anything about it. And so when the virus really hit, then voila, they were able to get themselves a much larger share of the global supply chain. So they did it they lied about the extent of the virus purposefully to increase their own footprint in trade. And to me, that's an act of war, So it's taken something that could have been innocuous, but turned it into something malicious by how they responded, how they used it to their advantage, how it began spreading. Because I live in the Seattle area, right? So we were national news because we were the very first state to have the first case of coronavirus, and then the rest of the country watched when coronavirus went through the Life Care nursing home in Kirkland. Like, that was national news. The rest of the country was watching this before any other state had a single case of COVID-19. And a lot of people, seem to have short memories, but if you remind them of that, they'll say, oh yeah, I remember that, right? But then all of these other states, like California, New Jersey, and especially New York, turned around and said, let's try that again. So, there's a lot of culpability here where, you know what? If justice is not going to be done, it needs to be taken.
Yeah. I can certainly agree with that attitude. It's just amazing to me with what we know now. They are still going forward with certain things like the masks, like with the kids, with the everything. And I'm ready for like sanity to return. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sanity needs to return. We're at the point where, the vaccine has been widely available and everybody who wants to take it has had the opportunity to do so. There really is nobody that doesn't have access to it who doesn't know about it. So, and of course, a lot of, younger people are like, well, I would rather just kind of, get COVID-19 and, deal with, a couple of days of, mild symptoms and then be done with it and be immunized naturally. That's kind of been the attitude of a lot of, younger people. And so, but, the older crowd, it's kind of like there may be more risk to them if they, say, I don't want the vaccine, but they've had that opportunity now and they've had it for a while. And it's time for the chips to fall where they may.
I couldn't agree more. Excuse me. So, one of my favorite articles that you wrote a while back was at the Libertarian Republic. We should teach our children to be capable of violence.
That's a good one.
I love that article because you talk about, your own family and how you deal with things like bullying, which is what the article talks about, and you spar every night after reading. So I want to hear more about that, and you can talk more about the article.
So yeah, so we do this little practice because there's two things that I love: literacy and fighting. So and my kids love to roughhouse, but we kind of make that like, the reward after reading. So sparring after reading is the formula that, we developed in this house, and they get to throw punches at dad, and dad kind of gives them softer and slower punches that, they learn, to block and then immediately hit back as hard as they can. So yeah, I've kind of built up a little bit more of an abdomen than what I had just, from the hits that I've taken. It's been good abdominal, exercise for me. But yeah, we do that. We do that sparring after reading. I know full well, that my kids went into school not knowing English. We learned Japanese first. I know the bully mentality because I went through that myself. Being the runt of the litter, where I didn't even get to be 100 pounds until high school. And even now, I only weigh about 130 pounds. I've always had, more of a smaller build. But so, it's kind of, I've been there, I've done that, I fought back, that worked for me. And so, that's what, we're going to teach. I'm not going to teach my child, to be a doormat just because, some bully thinks, he's not proficient in English, so he can't, tell his teacher what happened. Well, that's fine. Maybe he can't tell his teacher what happened, but you're going to get hit instead. And then me and the teacher can have a conversation about what happened.
Yeah, I've had that conversation with the principal. It's like talking to a crazy person. At my daughter's high school, they had zero tolerance policy. A girl hit her, and my daughter shoved her away. And this was in a hallway. And so I get called up there because she was fighting. And I said, so because my daughter was getting the same punishment as the other kid. And I'm like, whoa. Why is this? I said she was defending herself. She didn't even hit the other girl, which she had every right to do. Right. And he made my daughter leave the office, and he like got on his little high horse, and he's like, we're zero tolerance. She should have called for a teacher. I said, no, never. My daughter will never call for a teacher when someone is hitting her. She's going to defend herself.
Right. And so I graduated in the class of 2002. And so my class was actually kind of like a pioneer of zero tolerance. Of course, I was also like, a senior in high school. It was the very beginning of my senior year in September of 2001 when 9/11 happened. So I got to kind of go through like the military recruiters in the lunchroom every day. So I kind of have those interesting perspectives from being, in that era. But yeah, we were kind of like the pioneers of zero tolerance. And really all that means is saying that like bullying doesn't happen and everything is a mutual fight and both people get in trouble, right? So basically they declare their schools bully free and act like that, like because they said that's the case. But that's not the case, sometimes, someone really does need to get hit back, but they make it so that like, if you do defend yourself, you have equal culpability and you have equal punishment to the person that actually aggressed on you to begin with. So, for someone that may be, like a little bit more, timid, or someone that's actually, really serious about school and is getting good grades, it's almost like, defending yourself and having discipline on your record is a deterrent to your God-given right to defend yourself. So no, hit a motherfucker.
Right? God, I'm so glad to be done with public schools. So are your kids currently in public schools, or are you guys homeschooling now?
So they are currently in public schools, but that is something that very, very, recently, we have been, reconsidering, especially, my wife has always been a stay-at-home mom, and I've transitioned to working from home. So it's kind of, like we have a little bit more, control over what happens in the home during the course, of a day with me being here. And I've been keeping an eye out, for, I mean, we've kind of been kind of ground zero. I mean, not necessarily ground zero, because some states have already done it worse, but we've already had some of that, critical race theory stuff, popping up, where with my kids, being half Japanese, that's kind of problematic, in particular in Thurston County, Washington. And Thurston County is the county where our capital is, where Olympia is, in the county that houses our capital. They tried to, in their racial reporting, move Asians in with whites. So basically it was like white Asian and then people of color when they were reporting, like attendance statistics, grade statistics. They took the inconvenient minority that really goes against, their narrative of minority status, and just moved them over to white people. And with my kids being half white and half Japanese, I don't really see how someone can get away with that, because I think, Japan has one of the coolest and most culturally rich histories of any country in the world. Like, the oldest hotel is in Japan, and that's from the year 500, and has been run from the same family. They've been through the civil wars. They've been through, military general dynasties and things like that, like throughout their history. They have the kimono wear. They have, wonderful, festivals throughout the years that, that are representative, only to themselves. And Japan is a very nationalist country, and very homogenous, and they're a very prideful country of being Japanese. That's why my kids have to actually, they have to choose, they have to choose which citizenship they're going to hold at the age of 22. So at the age of 22, Japan allows you to be a dual citizen up until that point. But when you're 22, like when you've gone through school, they say you're either Japanese or you're not. Right. So, they're very nationalist, very homogenous. And for them, to be, just kind of like lumped in, with white people, that's why you see a lot of the Asian crowd, because a lot of other Asian countries are that way too, not necessarily to the extent Japan is. But a lot of Asian countries also, kind of tend to have a nationalist streak to them. Mm-hmm. But that's why you see the Asian community fighting against critical race theory more than anybody else.
I had seen that. Oh gosh, I can't remember her name, but there's a Chinese expat that she's in Colorado. She's libertarian. I'll think of her name in a minute, but she's out there screaming about critical race theory all the time. And
I think I know who you're talking about. Yeah. She was the one that fled when she was a child, fled communist China during the Great Leap Forward.
Yep. That's her. And it's crazy to hear young people who want to shut people like her down, who have been there and seen it in person, that's crazy to me. So
we do a cultural revolution, and they're the ones that are saying, hey, I've seen this one, right? Those are the people that you really need to be listening to, and meanwhile, China, kind of stokes all this stuff, especially on social media. So I actually started a parody account of a guy named Chen Weihua, and he's pretty much like a Chinese state journalist with China State Media. And so I created a parody account of him. And instead of Chen Weihua, I called it Chen Huawei, like the Huawei company. Haha, that's actually pretty clever, and I'm glad I thought of it. But so pretty much, like I use that account as a parody, to kind of like answer people in his replies and say the things out loud that he won't say, but very, very, very satirically, So where some people, before they realize, it's a parody, they're like, did this just come out of this guy's mouth? Well, it's actually what he really meant. I just said it very, very bluntly. But they put up a post, the other night for Eid Mubarak, wishing all of their Muslim brothers and sisters very well, where they're virtue signaling. But it's like they're the ones that have Muslims in concentration camps this very moment. And, all of the white leftists are on Twitter going, oh, thanks for saying Eid Mubarak. Like, you motherfucker. Like, do you have any idea what's actually going on there right now? Like either you do and you don't care because virtue signaling is more important than action. And I believe that's actually the case for a lot of people, where like making yourself look like a good person is actually better than being a good person, because you don't have to be a good person and put any effort into doing anything good. If you can just say something on Facebook and convince people that you are, that's why we've seen pretty much, the explosion, at the border with way more people in cages, COVID-19 running, rampant through these holding cells. And it's like the number of people being held in cages has like tripled during the Biden administration. And, I think that's, 3 times more wrong than it was under the Trump administration. And I didn't agree with that policy under the Trump administration. But the people that were the most vocal about that are suddenly quiet when it's 3 times worse. But it's because their leftist friends would not give them pats on the back for speaking out about it still, right? To them, it is more important to appear good and popular to, their own friends, get their likes, get their shares, and then go quiet when it really, really matters. When actually speaking out now would actually make you virtuous, because you would show that you actually have a consistent bone in your body. You're not doing that. So you were never virtuous to begin with. And I know a lot of people personally, that since the Biden administration took over, I've lost a lot of respect for. So, because it was the same thing, bashing it under Trump, zipping it under Biden, even though it's worse. Like,
it was more important to nail Orange Man bad to the wall on every little misstep and misspeak, and than it is to speak out against the atrocities that are even worse now under the new administration. Like, how could we speak out against the senile, creepy guy that we voted in? Right. It's not twist today in today's,
And between that, they'll also, take any relatively small event and blow it out of proportion. Like the people that say like January 6th was worse than 9/11. Are you kidding me? like January 6th, like anyone that even says that, even anyone that calls it so much as an insurrection, loses credibility with me instantly, because there were no guns there. There was nothing there. Only one person died as a result of that event, and that was the girl that was shot by Capitol Police, Ashley Babbitt. But to call that event, unruly people, hanging out on the Congress floor, to call that an insurrection, to me really undermines, that word.
I call it the worst insurrection ever, if you're going to call it that.
Right. If that is an insurrection, then it is the worst insurrection ever. Basically, to show up without guns and take selfies, right? That's what happened. But there's also a really large inconsistency there too, because you look at Portland and the federal courthouse, right? And you remind those people that trying to set fire to the federal courthouse, by its very definition, is also an insurrection. Right, an insurrection is not limited to just the Capitol building. It really is, a storming of any authoritative building, right? So when you remind those people, that it's an insurrection, that what they were doing was an insurrection, and they were the same people that, were really upset, when Department of Homeland Security was arresting people that were trying to set fires to the Portland courthouse. All of a sudden, there's a reason why that's different. No, it fits the definition. Well, yeah, but it's not the Capitol. Who cares, right?
Wasn't there people inside that building in Portland?
yes, there were people inside that building in Portland. And like I said, I live in, the Seattle area, so I'm very familiar with Chaz Chop, right? Where they took over a couple of blocks of the city, for weeks. People that were living there, couldn't safely enter and leave, their own, condominiums on that street on Broadway. But you try and say, how is this any different from the Malheur Wildlife Refuge takeover, with Ammon Bundy? How is this any different? But you are calling for the government to go in and execute them. How is it different though? And there's always, some willy-nilly reason like, oh, well, it was a federal building. Well, so was Portland, right? Well, but yeah, not Seattle though. Okay. But, it's like they went into, the Oregon Malheur Wildlife Refuge takeover when it was out of season. There was nobody there. They were protesting for a legitimate reason. Sure, they had their guns. One person, Lavoy Finicum, was gunned down by the FBI, which all of the leftists cheered for. But what is the difference between that and Chaz Chop, where they did the same thing and took over a whole city block? And yes, there were guns there. And yes, there were actual shootings that happened there where innocent people were actually killed and the protesters would not let the police in. So leftists just have no sense of any type of consistency. All they care about is that if you are not on my side, we want you dead.
And isn't that crazy? I remember from my childhood watching shows where there would be liberals, and they were all about free speech. They would never wish death on anyone for a difference of opinion. Look how far we've come since this is probably the mid 80s. Right. And now it's disagree with me and die.
Right. I mean, even going back, like 10 years ago, it seemed like, the worst, offenses, against free speech, was like the burn my flag and I'll kick your ass, kind of thing with those freaking boomers. But like even those people were just like, fun to laugh at. It's like I'll buy a flag and do whatever the fuck I want with it. Thank you. As long as I don't come on your property and burn your flag, you have nothing to complain about. And it's, I have a feeling that, a lot of leftists would feel the same way, who are, pro, burning the American flag. If I were to buy a UN flag off of eBay and set that on fire, then all of a sudden they would have a problem with that, where there's no difference. It's cloth.
Right. And it's yours. You can do with it what you want on your property. The difference is, you can't light shit on fire in a public space. And like, that's where I'm annoyed with them. Like, I don't care that you lit a flag on fire. I find it a little bit disrespectful, whatever. It's your flag. But
it's your flag, yeah.
You can't just light fires wherever you want to make a point. Like, that's not okay. And it's not virtuous when you're doing it to a flag. If you're doing it to a garbage can, it doesn't matter. You can't just go around lighting shit on fire.
Right.
Public.
And that's, kind of like been the, big thing that's come out of, a lot of the left-wing protests is setting fires, but it's kind of like, at the end of the day, property is property, and private property rights, is the very, very root of libertarianism. So the fact that there are two sets of people that would take exception with what I do with my own property based on there are two different things printed on the designs, I have to say, what the hell's, the matter with you? There's no consistency there.
That's what I find so frustrating. And that's why over the last 5 years now, it is so hard to have conversations with people on the left because they have no consistency. They have their blinders on. It is just, these are our talking points. We cannot stray. And if you disagree, then it's like a malfunction happens in the brain. I can almost see it.
And you can see conflicting positions and where the malfunction happens, where they're like, oh, you just want grandma and grandpa to die. And also, I hope you die.
Wow, aren't you a peaceful liberal person?
Right.
I can just see you out there marching for peace now in the
Right.
60s.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like the last of, like the Bush era liberals. It's pretty much, Tulsi Gabbard is really the only person out there, although granted she's an economic loon, and I kind of, like, you know, and also a gun grabber. So it's like, some people have been trying to court her towards the Libertarian Party, and I reject that move. But
She's a gun grabber?
unless she's willing to actually open up and have a conversation in good faith about those things. But I like Tulsi Gabbard as an individual, as a human, as a person that actually, has principle, has consistency, actually believes in being nice to people. So I certainly appreciate her for that. But yeah, I would not, welcome, a gun grabber and an economic illiterate into the Libertarian Party. And in fact, it's kind of like the economic illiterates of the Libertarian Party have recently started to exodus out, with some of the things that have, transpired, like in New Hampshire, for example.
I was wondering if you had been watching that.
Oh, I was watching that. I was on a Twitter ban when it happened, but yeah, I watched that all go down. But I know that there's two sides to it, but ultimately procedure was not followed. It was done the wrong way. It was, authoritative, pretty much to just essentially create a new party and say, well, if you want to be in the party still, then you need to reapply. um, like to me, that was just ridiculous, and that was all to get one person off of social media. So I know there's two sides of it. I think the sides have less to do with what actually happened than it does with the bias against people who belonged on either side. So even libertarians can be unprincipled, where pretty much a lot of people would take a side because they didn't like the people in the other party that was on it. Where I've been neutral to this sort of a thing, but said, you know what, the measures that were taken in New Hampshire was absolute bullshit. Like you just can't do that. So
Yeah, that was absolute bullshit. And I thought what transpired after all that was very, very interesting. I watched part of an LNC meeting, and then I think that was a day or two before Joe Bishop Henchman resigned.
mm,
And then we had another resignation. I don't know if there's been any more. I've kind of been not paying attention because there's so much going on with it. I'm just over it, kind of. I just want to see the outcome. Just tell me what happened.
yeah, it was quite something. It was something, pretty much to just at the time only be able to read along and not be able to reply because I earned myself a 7-day ban on Twitter during that time. I don't even remember what I said, but yeah, I was on a 7-day ban.
Well, if it's anything like Facebook, they don't tell you what you said. You have to guess.
Right, and I think that's actually correct. I actually think because it was one of those, because Twitter is one of those things where usually they're like, you've been banned for like 2 days or 3 days, and to start the countdown you have to delete the offending tweet, and that's usually their way of making you acknowledge and showing you what you tweeted. But in my case, this time there was nothing there. And like deleting tweets really isn't my thing. And if it was over a deleted tweet, why would you ban me over a tweet that was deleted? I mean, it's like they showed me nothing. They just said, you're banned. Believe us, it was bad. Believe us, it was bad. 7 days. Countdown starts now.
You've been naughty.
Right.
God, it's so it makes me feel like I'm a little kid in school when they do that shit. I'm like, really? You're taking away my right to talk to my friends because you didn't like what I said?
Right.
And one of my bans they said it was something I said in Messenger. I only talk to a very, very few people in Messenger. I'm friendly with all of them. There's no animosity going on in there. But somehow I got banned for saying something mean to one of my good friends.
Yeah, that happened to me on Facebook one time when me and a friend were just joking around, and he wrote, KYS for kill yourself, as a joke to one of my posts. And I replied, "Oh my God, you too, babe." And they banned both him and I.
Oh my God.
They took us both out for a week for that.
Ugh. I just had a flashback to junior high where my friend slapped me. I slapped him back. We both got to in school detention, and we're like, "What? We were kidding."
Yeah, and
Like,
it really does
fair.
kind of like, bring up, an interesting, conversation about, like the whole Section 220 thing. We're like, yes, I understand, social media companies, are a private corporation, but at the same time, they're taking orders, from the US government and removing tweets, at the government's request. So there really is, a conflict, of privacy there. So really, I'm not a fan of removing Section 220 because I know why it's there, but I do think it needs to be modified. And I think personally the solution is that terms and conditions need to be a contract. So an actual contract that both parties agree to. So right now it's like, Twitter has to just say, you just have to agree to this, in order to use our service. But they don't have to agree to anything in order to make money off of ad revenue for us. But there's a mutual benefit there, right? We get to use their service. They get to make revenue, off of showing things and advertising. And the mutual benefit is really all that is required for a contract under contract law. Both parties need to benefit somehow from an arrangement, and there need to be penalties for breaking that arrangement.
That would be interesting. So what
So
would
in their sense, if we break the arrangement, they can ban us or they can kick us off. But if they unjustly, silence us, then yeah, I think we should be able to litigate.
that would
It's
be
a
amazing.
contract, not a one-sided term.
Yeah, because right now we just got to bend over and take it. We don't really
Right.
have a course, and I've seen some of the bigger YouTubers, influencers, whatever, trying to take on YouTube and Facebook and whatnot, and they're just at the very beginning, so there's no idea how that's going to pan out. But there has to be some recourse for them taking away and doing what they're doing, especially the way that they're doing it.
Right. So yeah, so that's my position. We obviously can't remove 220 because of what the leftists will do if they get that kind of power without 220. But at the same time, things just cannot continue as they are, and some sort of accountability needs to be held. For being silenced by people that are making money off of us, and sometimes even at the government's request. Yeah, there really is a facet here that cannot continue to stay.
Well, it's not only at the government's request, but at what point, at what dollar amount that you're given
Right.
in subsidies that you're no longer a private entity. Like, how many billions of dollars how many billions does Facebook or Alphabet receive in subsidies? How can they possibly be still private? I don't understand that.
Right. Yeah. That's also a good point, because, tax breaks are one thing, I like tax breaks, but if you are actively actually like receiving taxpayer money, that's a very, very different thing than just getting a tax break. So yeah, anyone, that is receiving, subsidies, I don't think they, get the same private company benefits that all the other companies that don't get subsidies, should be able to get. I think if you truly are a private company and you are not, receiving government handouts and government subsidies, then yes, you are, 100%, a private company. But if you are, getting those subsidies, then actually technically you're sort of state owned a little bit, right? And anything that is even partially state owned where, commands for, removing tweets may come from the state. Even being partially state, owned like that, even, not being a shareholder, but being subsidized, I would declare, a form, of investment and ownership. Then yeah, you do lose a degree of your ability to restrict the same Bill of Rights that the government is restricted from being able to censor. So you stop kind of, receiving kind of that blanket I'm a private company thing when you're receiving money from the government and taking orders from the government.
So, explain what 220 is real quick, because I think I know, but just in case.
So 220 is pretty much the statute that says that that social media companies are not liable for what other people post. Like, for example, someone, posts like, I'm going to go commit an act of violence, but the social media company doesn't catch that. And that person does go out and commit that act of violence, that shields them, the social media company, from being responsible or having a degree of responsibility there. So in that aspect, that actually is a good thing, but they're citing 220 backwards, saying, so basically with 220, you have every incentive not to censor people if you are shielded from the consequence. But they are citing 220 in a backwards way for why they actually go out and censor people. So they're using it in a backwards way that they are not incentivized to use it for. So I would say that just doesn't apply. I would say you should not be able to do that if you are protected from the repercussions against it. What's your incentive? If your incentive is censorship against certain viewpoints, I think that just should not, be allowed to stand, especially if you're getting government money, because then you can violate rights.
Right. Yeah. And that's what I see happening. And that's how I see it. And it's just irritating to me that more people don't see it that way. They needed to pick publisher or platform. They picked, they didn't like it. They're trying to rewrite the rules.
So basically, how social media, I'll use a cool analogy here, how social media kind of jumps between publisher and platform is almost the same way that a bicyclist goes, I'm a pedestrian. Oh, wait, now I'm a car, right? Whatever,
it's their moment.
A pedestrian can use by running a red light, by using a crosswalk or something like that. They'll use both sets of rules to their own benefit. And pretty much like social media does the whole bicycle routine. I'm going to follow pedestrian rules in this situation, and now I'm a car. That's what social media does.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. I'm glad that you see it that way too, because I feel sometimes like I'm going crazy. Because I keep some leftist friends, that I've known for a long time that aren't quite as crazy as the most of them, but sometimes I wonder, I'm like, is it me or is it them?
Right. And sometimes you have to actually you have to stop and freeze and say, holy shit, I'm being gaslit in real time right now. You see it happening right in front of you, and you have to really concentrate to say, nope, this isn't real. This isn't real. Almost like a mirage or something like that. That's what, that's literally what it feels like, is being in the desert in 120-degree heat without water, and then you start seeing things and you have to say, no, that's not real. I have to get to water. That's what it feels like right now.
Absolutely. Fuck, I'm over it.
Absolutely. Fuck, I'm over it. I'll drink to that.
Cheers. So I was looking at your Twitter feed today, and I noticed a lot of tweets about the Olympics, namely the women's competitions and events. And a lot of stuff going on over there. So I've been kind of out of the loop. All I saw in general about Simone Biles is she quit a team, an Olympic team. She didn't quit the Olympics, but she quit a specific team. And I don't know if she was injured. I've seen something saying that like she was citing mental health. Do you know what's going on there?
I know that they had put like some kind of like a handicap against her or something like that, where it was like, harder for her to like earn Olympic points or something like that. I don't know too much about that situation. I think the mental health side is the side that they are citing there. I don't really have an opinion on it. I've always liked, Simone Biles. So, I don't think she's really like the virtue signaling type, like the women's soccer team that would pretty much like go on a knee while Sweden is scoring goals. I don't see Simone Biles as that, kind of a type, to try and make herself the story. So I do think there's probably some sort of legitimate grievance on her end that comes from, a place of, like unfairness in like the competition of the people that she was, like competing against. There was some kind of a handicap place, but that tried to provide more equity or give other people more of an edge against her. But what the specifics of that was, I don't know. But I would still I would do what she did. If it wasn't a fair race, even if it is the Olympics.
Oh my God.
There's
This is the first I'm hearing of this, points bullshit and equity. Like what? I thought they had to compete on the same level in the Olympics. Like you got to get this to get there.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know exactly what that handicap was because I haven't really looked into it. But something was placed on her event that would have, tried to make lower competitive people more competitive against her. So in her case, I would say, there's a way more cool shit to do in Tokyo than deal with that. Like,
yep.
There's lots of cool stuff to do in Tokyo than be cheated against in the Olympics.
Totally. I didn't realize it was that. So at first I was thinking, girl, just do it. Now that you're all this background, that makes much, much more sense why she quit. And I completely agree that I would have probably done the exact same thing. Like, fuck you guys. No, right. I worked my ass off. I have been working my ass off. Everybody knows my name because I do amazing in gymnastics. That's the only reason people know my name.
Right.
And they only hear it every 4 years, so that's crazy.
Simone Biles has been great. She's always been humble. And, she's not a brand new name. We know Simone Biles for a number of years. She never puts herself into any sort of controversy. She never puts herself into any sort of virtue signaling or anything like that. Like Simone Biles is the girl that just wants to go out and compete. She wants to be able to compete fairly. And if that's not the case, she's got the balls to walk away.
And more of them need to, because I don't like seeing any of the unfairness that happens. So what happened with, all I saw was a couple memes and like headlines, that the Sweden soccer team won against the US national team. But
it was 3-0. Like it wasn't even close. And we went in there, being the favorite team, to take gold. And we lose our first match, to Sweden that was way lower on those rankings. Sweden dominated us 3-0. I mean, numbers wise, that seems like, a small difference of 3 points, but this is soccer. 0-3, being shut out and having 3 points scored on you is a really big deal. I mean, this is a sport where sometimes people don't score and go to sudden death. Or the difference, in points is like, it's like a 2-1 match. Like someone scored 2 points, another person scored 1 point. That's much more typical of soccer. But it was 3-0. Like that's domination. So yeah, absolutely. It's fun to see, Megan Rapinoe, get dominated. I really don't like her.
I can't stand her. Do you think she will eat even a bite of humble pie this week? Like even a bite?
No, because I saw that video. It was kind of like a reshared video from another time. I think it was like from a World Cup match that they actually won. I remember watching, after the Japan earthquake of 2011, where the very next World Cup right after was the Japan women's team versus the U.S. women's team, and on that one I was Team Japan, and Japan won in penalty kicks, and that was actually one of the best sports games I've ever seen. Was women's soccer. Weird enough to say, like that was a very, very competitive and good game. And I actually recorded that on DVD after I had saved it on my DVR. But that actually was an incredible sports game. But yeah, so there was a video of a different tournament that Megan Rapinoe won, where she's holding up the trophy and she's like, "I deserve this. I deserve this." Like she's not humble at all. So to see her get freaking chopped, and get beaten that badly, by Sweden's women's team that was not in any way even favored to place a medal, to me is just delicious.
Right? Oh, yeah. I'm going to have to go back and I'm going to have to look up that footage and watch because I can't stand her. And I'm sorry, after all this recent Victoria's Secret controversy with the Angels getting the axe and like now just whoever,
Here's fat
Megan Navajo is going to be an angel. Like,
right.
What?
Yeah, junior high kids waiting by their mailboxes hardest hit.
Like, I'm sorry, they had a vision for their company. It was about desire and what do you call it? Oh God, I'm 3 beers in now. Fantasy. And that's what the Angels show and the dress wear and all that was about. And it was geared towards, more petite people or whatever, but they also had large sizes. Like I remember going in there before I had the operation and they could fit me. It was fine. And so I'm super confused as to why I think either women who shop there or men who watch the show are going to be at all interested in this change.
They're not. And granted, I do understand that there, are problems, with the modeling industry, especially, where the camera adds 10 pounds. And a lot of the women that you saw in Victoria's Secret were kind of really borderline, on low weight. So I think there kind of is, a really good discussion to be had on that. But at the same time, to take it to the other end of that spectrum and say, here's 300-pound women in thongs, it's like I open up my mailbox and it's like, Jesus Christ. Like,
I don't know who wants to see that, but I'm not one of them.
Right. Like, no, we're not, I'm going to go bleach my eyeballs out now. Like, sorry, not sorry.
I mean, to me, that is more of a niche area that they're going into than what they were in currently. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry, you were mainstream and now you want to cater to a very, very, very small percentage of the population. And the rest of us, like, I'm not going to buy your shit anymore. I'm just not.
Right. I mean, I don't buy their stuff either because, look at me, I've got a beard and things. But yeah.
That's not indicative these days,
I am wearing a Hello Kitty crown, but that's funny. But I don't dress in lingerie or anything like that. I don't go that far. This started out as a meme. I guess I'll explain the elephant in the room here, my Hello Kitty crown. So back when I was on Facebook, when Drea here and I were Facebook friends, occasionally I would post pictures of myself on the toilet. I would take toilet selfies for
too
fun,
often,
just to piss people off. And then it was one year on my birthday where I decided to put on my daughter's Hello Kitty crown and take the picture on my toilet because I thought that would be funny. And so after I posted that picture, one of my friends, I believe his name was Aaron Abel, he cut out my head wearing the Hello Kitty crown, and he posted my face, my head on George Bush, George H.W. Bush, in front of, or no, George W. Bush, I'm sorry, Jr. He posted my head on George W. Bush in front of the aircraft carrier with that mission accomplished banner, right? So it was like my head there on George Bush. So I thought that was kind of funny. And so I took that picture and I created my own post, and I said, when I start an argument in the comments and disappear, and posted that picture, right? That's how I view myself. And that actually was like, everybody on my page thought that was just like the funniest thing. And then it just got to like posting a picture of my head in a Hello Kitty crown on other various memes, that were going around and re-memeing them. So that was kind of like a big thing on my page, where people, other people on my friends list were doing that and posting them on my page, and then I would go ahead and reshare them. So that was kind of like a funny phenomenon, between like my 2,500 followers that I had on Facebook. That took place pretty much right up until Facebook banned me. But that's the Hello Kitty crown. That's why.
I had almost forgot about all your toilet pictures. I am adamantly against anything to do with the bathroom. I just hate it.
Yeah, I would just do it to make people mad or make people uncomfortable, or for my mom to go, what the fuck? Like,
I always thought it was funny. We always had something funny to say, sitting here, blah, 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 thinking about this, whatever, And I'm like, I'll like it, but I'm not going to laugh because you're in the bathroom.
Right. Yeah, no, those are good times. That was a lot of fun. Maybe someday they'll give me my account back, but if they do, I'll probably just delete it after I download every single picture that I had ever posted, because I had like a 40,000 meme thread, 40,000 memes. We actually had a thread going where all we did was post memes, and that particular thread had like 40,000 memes posted. So I just want to do like a great big download of that thread and save all those memes, and then trash the account if they ever give it back to me.
God, yeah, I remember you had a lot of amazing photos, especially of, your visits to Japan, where you guys were over there for like a month at a time. Like, that was so neat.
I've still got all those photos in higher resolution, so those I'm not hurting for. But yeah, I want my memes.
Yeah, that's an amazing meme count, damn it. Like, you'll never get that many like followers on Facebook. It's amazing to get that many posts on it, like, that's crazy.
Right, yeah, because there was probably like 9 or 10 of us that were participating in that, every day over the course of like 3.5 years. Every day we're all posting memes every single day, 365 days a year, and we got to like a 40,000 meme count. It was pretty awesome.
That is awesome. Facebook, with all of the bans and the shadow bans and bullshit, they kind of beat me down. I haven't been posting much on my professional pages because the reach got just throttled. So I feel like it's fucking worthless. But anyway. But so where can people find you on Twitter?
So Twitter, I'm just at Guy Squiggs, GUYSQUIGGS, just like it shows on my name here. So of course without the space, but Guy Squiggs on Twitter, that's where people can find me. I also write for the Libertarian Republic, which is owned by Austin Peterson, who is also a KWS morning news host, AM/FM radio in Jefferson City, Missouri. So it's actually kind of cool because a number of times I've actually gotten to go on the air on Austin Peterson's show to discuss articles that I write. So it's kind of like when I write a good article, it actually doubles as content for his morning radio show. So that's been a fun gig. It's been something I've always really enjoyed volunteering for, even though morning show in Missouri is super early morning in Washington. So
But
But
Austin's
yeah,
a good
it's always
guy,
been fun.
you know.
Yeah, Austin's a good guy. I love that guy a lot.
When he asks, you're like, yeah, sure, whatever. All right. Well, it was so amazing having you on. Thank you so, so much. And I will definitely have you on if you'll come on again
Right?
sometime.
Oh, possibly. Maybe the next time. Maybe the next time I come on, some people are probably wondering what this is.
Yes,
This
tell us
is,
about that.
this is an electronic drum cymbal. So I've got my phone stationed on my electronic drum set. That's kind of a work in progress. It's kind of amazing what you lose when you move. So I've got a couple of more things that I need to repurchase. But maybe next time I come on, I will introduce myself with a drum solo.
That would be amazing. And maybe, if, depending on where the kids are, maybe they can help you out.
Yeah, maybe it'll probably be after one of their lessons.
Awesome. All right, sir. Well, it was amazing talking to you. You have an amazing night, and hopefully we will talk soon.
Let's do it. Let's talk soon.
All right. Thanks.
Yep. Have a good night.
You too.